got a Monday get-together here on Birds 365. We would be Mac and Mac, Jody Mac and Johnny Mac. Our two guests today are Mike and Mike. We got Mac and Mac and Mike and Mike. A little later, Mike Tannenbaum scheduled to join us, former GM of both the Dolphins and the Jets. Right now, we've got our buddy from down the shore, Mike Gill, looking good. Where are you broadcasting from right now, Mike Gill?
I am on my back porch.
Living a life down the shore, Mike Gill.
Drinking coffee on the back porch. That's what, John, you sent me that email last night, and I was watching Moneyball like you, I believe. And I woke up this morning to get my coffee at 7 o'clock and said, I got to help my buddies out.
Appreciate it, Mike. And by the way, I tried to text you. So it bounced back. Did you get a new number? We're doing business on the air right here.
I did not get a new number, but I'll have to check to see if something's up with my phone. I don't know. There's been some cell phone problems down here all weekend.
Little inside baseball, doing business on the show, Jody. But let's Moneyball, Logan Paul. That's the reason why. By the way, if you're the lowest common denominator and you're buying Logan Paul versus Floyd Mayweather, don't complain when it turns out to be nothing. Mike Gill and I are watching Moneyball for the 7,000th time, and it was a better time.
Actually, John, I tuned in a little to Brutus the Barber Beefcake and Greg Valentine's Greatest Lost Treasures. A&E does that.
That's a good show. That's
Sunday nights. Yeah,
that's a very good show. All right, Eagles stop, Mike. Let's get it in that direction. Nick Sirianni, final OTAs. You see mandatory minicamps in some cities around the country starting this week. Will be Tuesday in some NFL cities. Do you think the Eagles acquiesced a little bit too early on that aspect? From my perspective, you need mandatory work with a new head coach, a new coaching staff, and all those types of things.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was talking last week about, and not even thinking about what you're saying is this whole Zach Ertz thing and whether he would show up to the mandatories or not and take the fine. I guess we're not going to find that out because if they don't have to make him come, if they decided against this, we're not going to find out how serious he is about the contract situation. And I agree with you. Like, I would think that you want to see the mandatories there to see who's focused, who wants to be here, who has, that focus of, a couple of years ago, what was it when Kerry Williams went out to get the sconces and everybody went bananas because, but you found out kind of early that he was just an average guy. And you want to see who your guys are, the new coach, what kind of grasp of this team does he have? Because it seems that he's got a pretty good grasp of the team. He's very rah-rah and his people. He's kind of invigorated what has been a pretty apathetic fan base over the last couple of months. And I feel like even though the team seemingly doesn't have a lot of expectations, all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's almost like, well, they just get Steve Nelson. This team can make a deep run. It's like, all right, calm down a little bit. But I think the mandatories would have been interesting for a couple of reasons to see who's following this coach, who's got his back. And the whole Zach Ertz thing, I think, would have been very interesting to see if he showed up.
All right, let's go to Zach Ertz. Since that Julio Jones guy got traded this week, I know it's not official yet, but it's going to get done. That means that Zach Ertz is probably as viable a candidate, a guy who's had a career resume that's pretty damn good, who we know is available by trade in the NFL right now. Does this open up the possibilities anymore? Does it change Zach Ertz's expiration date in Philadelphia at all because the Julio Jones trade is now official done and he's heading to Tennessee?
That's interesting because I don't know that the Falcons got what they thought for Julio Jones, right? They got a second-round pick. I think they wanted a first-round pick. They couldn't get one. If they would have got one, he probably would have been traded by then. So the Eagles are holding out for probably a third or a fourth. I would imagine that's not on the table. And there's been reports that, well, we're not just going to give him away. So what's the stare down here? Are you going to cut him and just let him walk for nothing? Are you going to take the lowest offer that you get up until the moment that you feel comfortable? Because I would imagine at this point, Julio Jones goes for a second-round pick. If I'm a GM of another team, I'm thinking, hey, Ertz is great. Jones is way better. I'll give you a sixth. How's that sound? That might be the best thing they get. Is Howie Roseman going to acquiesce to that? This one's a very interesting stare down that's about that, because he doesn't like to lose trades too much, right? Where he just like, we'll give you the guy for the 7th. That doesn't seemingly happen. But at the same time, that's why these mandatories would have been so interesting. I don't see him playing and just showing up here, but I also don't see him being the type of guy that says, well, am I going to sit out the whole – is he going to hold out the whole year? I mean, there's a little triangle here that is certainly interesting. Roseman, can he get value? Does Zach Ertz blink? Do the Eagles blink? This thing is going to be interesting because you're right, Jody. He is probably the next highest profile guy that is contractually obligated to a team. The team doesn't really have plans for him. He doesn't want to be here. I don't see him playing here at all, whether he holds out or is traded.
Mike, you said something interesting there, and I agree with Howie Roseman does not like to lose trades. At what point do you kind of look at it from a different perspective and say, Zach Ertz is so well respected in the Eagles locker room. He's meant so much to this organization as a whole. Does that have a lasting impact on the other guys in the locker room that looks at it and says, look at the way you're treating Zach Ertz? Is there a way to manage that situation a little bit better?
It's a fair question. I guess it depends on each individual's view of the business. Do I, Dallas Goedert, understand that this is the business, or do I, Dallas Goedert, say this guy played the same position as me and look how this is going? I mean, they're talking about extending his contract. Is he saying, well, they're going to extend my contract and then 3-4 years from now they're going to let it expire and not care about what I do? So I really think it's up to each individual mindset. It's a different thing, I guess, if you're in the same room, in the tight end room with him. Here's another thing, though. What does Howie Roseman and the front office view for this team? I mean, do you get to a point and say, I'm not giving up a 6th-rounder because I think we're better with him on the team? Or do they look at this as a throwaway year? At what point do you manage, that whole, we have a shot and we're better with Zach Ertz? I don't say a shot to win the Super Bowl, but I would imagine they probably think they have a shot in this division. Do you guys agree with that? I mean, if their offensive line stays healthy, they've got a pretty good defensive front. I think they think their linebackers are better. If Anthony Harris has I would imagine he's an upgrade over Mills at safety. If they can get another corner, I would think they can compete in this division. So are you more competitive with or without Zach Ertz? I'm sure that is something they're managing too.
Yeah, but I think that horse is out of the barn. If Howie Roseman is thinking along those lines, or if you ever said anything along those lines to a member of the media, I don't think that would go well. I think it's a fait accompli that Zach Ertz is going to be elsewhere.
Agree with that.
Let me put you on the coach meter here. John had some interesting points on Nick Sirianni and how he handles the players to this point, how he handles the media to this point. I want to get your take on another important relationship, and that's between the coach and the owner. For me, the Eagles have a chance to be okay offensively this year if they've got the perfect balance of run-pass ratio. And in a league that is leaning toward more passing with every year more and more and more, maybe the Eagles do it a little bit differently this year with a rejuvenated veteran offensive line that show me an offensive line that doesn't like the run block. I'll tell you it doesn't exist. Will the head coach be allowed to run the football, to call his plays, to put together an offense the way he wants? Or is it going to be like the former relationship between the coach and the owner, where the owner wants to pass, and the coach is supposed to say, okay, boss, okay, boss, okay, boss. How's that relationship going to work between Sirianni and Lurie?
Yeah, that's a fascinating one because I don't think anybody thought that Lurie had much of an impact on that situation. And we hear, hey, they won the game in Green Bay, and then he was mad that they won the game but ran the ball too much. So that was almost like this whole Lurie thing and how much hand he has all of a sudden kind of grasp of this team has seemingly been a new revelation. I don't feel like anybody thought that he was some meddling owner. So why would we think if all of a sudden he became a meddling owner, it just last a year and then he decided, I'm going to get out of this? So no, I think that him and Sirianni are going to meet probably pretty frequently, much like Peterson kind of said towards the end. And the fact that is, look, I brought you in and hired you because of the style that I was looking for. So if all of a sudden he turns into some ground and pound guy, I would be pretty surprised, because I'm sure that the interview process, he probably let it be known that that's not my philosophy, that I want to be able to kind of have a little bit more, or I don't want to say a run pass balance, but rely on the pass a little more. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't be here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey Lurie, Mike, he wasn't happy after the Eagles won the Super Bowl. He was not happy after the Eagles won Super Bowl 52. Different reason, because they gave up so many yards, but that's the reason Jim Schwartz was unhappy, because he was hearing it from the owner after they raised the Lombardi Trophy. So, I mean, it is a guy who is very involved. And by the way, for the most part, I think that's great, because when you have an owner who's involved, you have an owner who cares, and the worst kind of owner is the apathetic owner. However, you know, when it's a big decision, head coach, quarterback, that's fine. But when you're in the weeds and you have an owner saying, oh, the assistant wide receiver coach isn't good enough, the guy who runs the water isn't good enough out to the field, then it becomes a bit of an issue. And that's where I think we are. Where's Jeffrey Lurie going to be on that tightrope? And it's going to define sort of Nick Sirianni, what he's going to be as a head coach in this league.
Yeah, and, you know, the interesting thing is, like, Sirianni comes here, he's pretty much an unknown. He's not on anybody's radar. And I feel like this is kind of the pattern that the Eagles have followed. Andy Reid was on nobody's radar. They find him. He works out. Chip Kelly, for the most part, I mean, he was a very high-profile college coach. Nobody seemingly could get him. And the Eagles figured out a way to get him to come here. You know, he was going to go to, Tampa or Jacksonville, and decided not to. Everybody
was kind Cleveland, but whatever.
Somewhere. And everybody was kind of fighting for him. They figured out a way to get him. And then Peterson, was Doug Peterson getting an interview with anybody else? No. I mean, So I don't know how and where these guys land on the radar. So you got to give them some credit for uncovering and finding some of these guys that nobody else. Andy Reid is now the Andy Reid that we know, but he may have never gotten an opportunity had Jeffrey Lurie not kind of bucked the trend to say, hey, I'm going to give a quarterback coach the head coaching job. So for that element of Sirianni's inexperience and how young he is, I'll at least give them that benefit of the doubt that they have uncovered guys that had not been on anybody's radar. The one guy who was on people's radar was Chip Kelly, and he didn't make it. So let them go back to the formula that they've used in the past, which is finding young guys before other teams kind of get their hands on them. And I think the defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, might be down that same road, that teams are going to probably be calling him if this team has kind of a surprising year.
All right, Mike Gill, I don't know what you were talking about with your listeners and your callers to your show leading up to this weekend, but we now know Julio Jones is not going to be an Atlanta Falcon, which from at least a minimal perspective, that's good news for the Eagles, because he won't be in the Falcon lineup week one when the season gets underway. But I know that some people were hoping that the Eagles got involved in those conversations. Never a big deal gets by without Howie Roseman at least inquiring. I doubt the Eagles were very much in the picture and or a potential landing spot for Julio. It doesn't bother me that the Eagles didn't get him. Your situation is what it is. Their cap situation is they've got a lot of young wide receivers they want to give a shot to. I'm not bothered at all by the fact that the Eagles didn't put as good, if not a better, offer on the table for Julio Jones than the one the Falcons took. Are you put off by it?
No. The only thing that would have been intriguing is for two reasons. But I agree, Jody. I mean, a 32 years old guy making the money that he's making, you know, it might work for the first year. You know, like, the only intriguing thing is, hey, Alabama, veteran superstar receiver, get him around Devonta Smith, get him around Jalen Reagor, get him in a very young room. That this one thing you got to say about Sirianni is there's a picture that somebody tweeted out, and it's a picture of him and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, just the two of them standing together. And I'm thinking, man, if this guy can get something out of him, he would be what a wizard project that would be. But that would be the only thing for Jones, is to get a veteran guy in this Greg Ward is the veteran, and the guy was playing quarterback 4 years ago, for God's sake. So they don't have a guy in that room that can stand up and be like, look, guys, so that would have been intriguing. The other thing that I had talked about on my show, guys, was if Roseman makes that trade, isn't the message we think we're good enough? Look at last offseason. Look at the moves they made last offseason. If you remember the Vegas lines, the over-under was like 10. I mean, people thought this team was going to be really good. It's not much different, right? I mean, it's not a much different roster than the one they had a year ago. What happened last year? The team was decimated, and the quarterback did not play very well. So I go back to, is there a small part? Now, John, you've mentioned this with me on my show many times. Roseman, the Eagles are always going to be linked to the biggest names because Roseman's always doing his due diligence and making the calls. But did he make the call to the Falcons because he thought they had a chance? Because he thinks if I can get that guy here, we're better than people think we are. I feel like that is a very interesting kind of story that leads up to training camp if they continue to add to this roster. If they stay the way they are right now, which I can't imagine. I mean, one of you guys, are you going to play corner? Because who they got right now is the equivalent, right? I mean, they need help bad over there. But if they get one, I think that all of a sudden the excitement gets a little different. So the whole Julio Jones thing, I think it wasn't really a great fit right now, other than locker room. He would have been a good player, right? Devonta Smith on one side, Smith on the other. I guess they play Rieger in the slot. You got Dallas Goedert. All of a sudden, your offense looks pretty darn good. But I think the messaging there would have been the interesting part. We think we're pretty good.
Speaking of that messaging, Mike, it seems like we've been in this cycle for a number of years where previous season ends in disappointment. Now, that's been different. Could be in the playoffs. Last year was a total disaster. But Howie comes up, talks to us, and says, you know what? We got to get younger. We got to turn this roster over. We got to get more cost effective. Then things start to move along, and I start to feel just like what you said. We're a little bit better than people think. This time it's about the offensive line. It's about the defensive line. All of a sudden he's signing Ryan Kerrigan. Now, very cost-effective deal. No issues from that standpoint, but still – he's taking reps away from younger players. He's making calls on Julio Jones. Are the Eagles falling down the same rabbit hole they always fall down? Well, instead of being disciplined.
There's something people – I got news for you. People don't like Howie Roseman, right? That's not a secret. If you go back and look at the 20 years that he's been here, they have had back-to-back losing seasons one time. That's it. You tell me a franchise that wouldn't sign up for back-to-back, and they went 7-9 and 7-9. It wasn't like they were 4-12 and 4-12. They had back-to-back losing seasons once. If they lose again this year, that would be twice. The percentages say they're not having a losing season this year. So this is a team that went 7-9 and won the Super Bowl. There were no expectations entering that year. It was a kind of an older roster. They almost followed the same map. They went out and signed a couple of older guys, Chris Long and Kerrigan. We've seen the parallels there. They went out and got an older running back in LeGarrette Blount, or a veteran running back, LeGarrette Blount. Well, guess what? Why did they sign Kerryon Johnson? Where did that come from? So they've made these subtle little moves that almost mirror what they did when they had no expectations coming off of a losing season. We all saw how that ended up.
Mike, I want to ask you
about Jody Mack. You're thinking over there. I see you.
Yeah, I am. I try and do a little of that each and every Birds 365. Actually think about what's happening in Eagle Land. I'm going to go outside Eagle Land. And I know I asked you about this the last time we had it on, but I apologize for not remembering exactly your stance. And maybe your stance has changed a little bit because Julio Jones just went to the Tennessee Titans. Indianapolis Colts this year. Carson Wentz is their quarterback. Everybody seems excited and happy in their camp this year. I think Tennessee is still the team to beat in that division. If they weren't before they got Julio Jones, they are now. The Eagles have that pick this year, which will either be a first or a second going into 2022, depending on how much Carson plays and how good the Colts are. How good are the Colts going to be with Carson Wentz at the helm?
You know what's funny is they lost their offensive coordinator and defensive back coach, when that happened here, that was the big narrative the next year. Well, they don't have Frank Reich. That's the problem. So, I don't know, is losing Nick Sirianni that big of a deal to Indianapolis? It doesn't sound like it. Here's a guy who's now a head coach in the league, and it doesn't seem to be a blip on the radar out there. But I think they're pretty good. I mean, obviously, one of the reasons why they're pretty good is their offensive line is fantastic. And that's the one thing here that gives me some sort of positive vibes is you have a good offensive line. You're going to be competitive in almost every single game. You have a shot to win if your offensive line's healthy. And I don't think anybody out there thinks that what Philly has on the line is very poor. I mean, they're going to be very good at all 5 spots if they stay healthy. Same with Indianapolis. That's probably the best offense, one of the top 3 offensive lines in football. It all comes down to health. Now, the defensive side of the ball, they've gotten progressively better and better and better each year. I mean, just like their line was it caused Luck to retire. Their line was so bad. And here we are 3 years later, and they got one of the best lines in football. And that's what's kind of happening on their defensive side of the ball. But we'll see how the coaching losses impacts that team. And it all comes down to how that quarterback bounces back, right? I mean, that was such – I used to say on my show, as long as Carson Wentz is the quarterback, he will not allow you to have the season you had last year. I just couldn't – he was such a competitive guy, it seemed, and he just wouldn't allow the wheels to fall off of the season. And then I watched it happen. I couldn't believe it. I said, oh, my God, like what happened to this guy? Sometimes we all need a little change of scenery. Sometimes that just kind of brings out, the best in you. Just you get into a rut. I'm imagining that's where he was. He just did not want to be here anymore. I think it just hated walking in that building. So I would imagine he bounces back because I could not imagine watching what happened to him last year happen again.
I can't imagine. Mike, I talk about it every day. I still can't figure it out. That somebody like that played at the heights that he did, fell to the point where he was the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. The worst.
Right. But there's to go back to bring it back to the Eagles a little bit is he was the worst. And I was a Wentz guy. I can't believe I'm saying he was the worst. And I said every week on Monday we'd come in. I said the quarterback got an F. I give him an F. He was F. If he was just C-, they probably win 4 more games last year.
He's still here. If he was
if you get just average quarterback play this year, aren't you better? Like significantly? Because you got, not to mention, you had really bad quarterback play coupled with 13 different line combinations, not very good wide receiver play. And if you look back at their schedule, I said this the other day, these games, they're losing by 1 score. Like how? You had the worst quarterback play in the league, the worst offensive line. They weren't the worst offensive line play, but the problem is, hey, my name's Jack Driscoll. Who are you? Oh, I'm Nate. Next week, oh, I'm Jack Driscoll. Who are you? Oh, I'm Matt Pryor. Nice to meet. Hey, you had a different guy next to you every single week. You can't win like that in this league. I mean, it's and somehow they were somewhat competitive in games. Now, not aesthetically pleasing, but I don't know how they did it. It's fascinating to me that they were somewhat competitive in games with that quarterback play and the revolving door on the offensive line. And by the way, a very average defense.
Want to run this one by you, Mike? John gave me a strong take on this early, which I hope is not accurate, but he knows pretty well, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He said Nick Sirianni better win, and he better win early because of the way that he presents himself, because of the way he answers questions to the media. The fan base are going to have their perception because of the way he does his business. John was telling me if they're like 0-3, the roof could come down on Nick Sirianni. I think that's pretty damn early. I think the Eagles roster, yes, if Brandon Brooks is back and he's Brandon Brooks, they'll be better. If Lane Johnson can play 14 out of 17 games rather than 7 out of 16, yeah, they'll be better. But this roster still has holes and it still has issues. I don't know. Take Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick came in here, coached the Eagles. We saw what happened last year to Bill Belichick when he didn't have a good enough roster, below 500. So I don't know that this is on the head coach as much as it is on the talent on his team. How quickly could it go really bad for Nick Sirianni, in your opinion?
Oh, see, I disagree with you, John. I think if this team's 0-3, 0-4, I mean, you think the visceral for Roseman's bad now. I can't imagine. These people are going to literally be standing outside that building wanting him gone. I mean, I cannot think of a more hated figure in the – I've been doing my show. I've been doing my show, I guess, since 2005. I can't think of a guy that comes close. The man won a Super Bowl, by the way, and is the most just disliked person I've ever come across. I can't even think of a number two. If you said who's number two to Roseman in this town, I can't think of one. I mean,
it might be me for criticizing Nick Sirianni, but I want to frame it.
I understand your point, though, is that there's excitement because they like this young coach and that, but don't you think that it all deflects back to Roseman, man?
Here's why I say it, Mike, because you and I were watching the same thing last night, Moneyball. Think about that movie. Howie loves that movie, so I'll bring it back to Moneyball. What is the definition? Obviously, it's Hollywood, everything about. But when you do something different and it doesn't work, people just lose their minds. So you have to be better. So when you're playing the carnival games, when you're playing tetherball out there, when you're having backpedaling races, when you got the carnival barkers saying, "Here we go," you're doing things in a different way. And then you're up on the podium and you're saying, "That's a great question, Mike Gill. That's a phenomenal question, Mike Gill." And then you don't answer the question, people figure it out pretty quickly. I'm saying because of the style, because he's doing things differently. If different doesn't work, it's worse than status quo not working. Would you agree with that standpoint?
Yeah, I see what you're saying about, that he's got everybody on his side right now. Hey, get on my side. I'm going to say everything to get you excited. We're all jazzed up. And then the second doesn't go well, it almost turns into the Andy Reid, we need to do a better job, when people are like, all right, I've had enough of that. Andy didn't win right away. It was kind of a different time, though. I mean, the team has now established itself as, I don't know, one of the premier franchise. I hate this. I don't want to use the word gold standard, but they haven't had very many losing seasons in 25 years. I mean, this team is consistently competitive. So I think Sirianni's in a different spot than where. But
by the way, Mike. Yeah, by the way, I said overachieve. I don't mean win the division, win the Super Bowl, and I think that's a good point for him because the expectations are so low. But he's going to have to overachieve. If he's 0-4, 0-5, 0-6, you're going to hear this high school rah-rah. This guy's overmatched. It's going to be bad.
Yeah. Now, what's the number? Like, is it 0-5, 6?
Yeah, that's difficult. I don't think it's 0-3, 0-4. I think you start to hear it. I think you start to say, this guy's overmatched. This guy's a high school coach. This guy's rah-rah, all that kind of stuff. Well, might be unfair. I think you're going to hear it.
It's like, last year that there was high expectations. Well, what happened was you relied on older guys and they broke down. I mean, if Deshaun Jackson plays last year, they're probably pretty good. If Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks don't get hurt, Steve's probably pretty good. But you relied on older guys. That's where the rub kind of came in. It wasn't that they had bad talent. It was that you put faith in guys that just couldn't produce anymore at the level that you expected them to. And that's when a season comes crashing down. Are they in a similar mold here right now where it goes back to the GM? Hey, you put this team on the field and thought that Lane Johnson was going to get through a season. You thought a guy with 2 torn Achilles was going to get. Now, I don't have any problem with Brooks. I think he looks like he's in fun. I loved his answer. Hey, last time I tore my Achilles, I was the best guy in football, period. So, hey, that's a great answer to me, but you got a lot of – and the other guy, Kelsey, he was the one guy that didn't get hurt last year. What are the percentage chances he makes it through the season this year? And last year
he's always hurt. He just plays through it, Mike. He
played with an injury last year that he probably normally wouldn't, but the whole rest of the line was hurt, so he gutted it out. So I think, again, I see what you're saying, John, but I, again, go back to that guy is despised so much that more will go to him than would go to Sirianni.
All right. So I got Gill on my side. That's a good thing. Last one for me. And John tells me that Nick Sirianni is a perpetual loser in all the competitions that he has.
Oh,
That anytime he gets involved in any competition, he always loses. So at some point before the season starts, somebody has to be a sacrificial lamb. Somebody actually has to lose to Nick Sirianni in some competition. What Eagle player is going to step up and say, Coach, I'll lose to you. I know you need this one, Coach. I'm ready to go into the tank. I'm ready to go all process and Sam Hinkie for you. I will intentionally lose to you. Who's going to be that Eagle player that will go down at the hands of Nick Sirianni?
Well, if I knew who the punter was at this point, I would say he's got to be the obvious guy. But do they even have a punter on the roster at this point?
Wow, come on. It's Aaron Cepas, Mike. Everybody knows that.
What?
Yeah.
Wait. Yeah. Repeat that, please.
Aaron Cepas.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, only Birds 365 can get a Aaron Cepas mention on the program. That's hardcore football fans right there. Look,
and by the way, we talk about specialists. Jake Elliott is the best at all these things. Unbelievable golfer, unbelievable basketball player, softball player. You name it. Jake Elliott, as Nick mentioned, wins at everything except maybe the occasional 33-yard field goal.
Oh, shot on goal score by McMullen.
The other guy would be J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Like, hey, Coach, I know I've been a big disappointment, but I'll let you beat me. Can I get a roster spot?
That's not bad. That's not bad.
That's very good thinking on your part. Yeah. We will wrap it on that note. Mike Gill, we appreciate you getting up and go mow the lawn or something behind you. It looked like the bushes need a little trimming back there. So get to work before it gets too hot out, Gill. Thanks for coming on with us, buddy.
Thanks.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
Mike.
That is Mike Gill from 97.3 ESPN Radio down the shore and longtime partner of Johnny Mac. I am his partner now, Jody Mac. We are the Mac and Mac guys. This is Bird 365. Come back, a couple more things I want to run by John. And then coming up about 25 minutes from now, we'll be joined by another Mike. That would be Mike Tannenbaum, former general manager of the Jets, the Dolphins, now executive analyst for ESPN. Come right back with Mac and Mac here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.